All right. Three, two, and one.
Brother Gwen.
Good morning, everyone. We hope that all of you are safe and doing well. And our prayers go out to everyone who need a touch in the hand of God in their lives, their family, their loved ones, and friends. This is Insightful Foundations, a collaboration, Morgan State University, between the University Chapel and the Office of Residence Life and Housing. Once again, we thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Reverend Dr. Keels.
Good morning, Baltimore and beyond. These are the times that try women and men's souls. These are the times when you are armed with information, you indeed have the power to understand the conditions in which we are facing. As a people of color, we have fought a tremendous fight for 40 years to understand the insidiousness of racism and stereotyping and how it affects our daily lives. Moreover, how it informs the perception that others have of us. I can remember back in '68 with the Kerner Commission report, reading a very telling conclusion that said, and I'm paraphrasing, if white America allows what it reads in the newspaper, sees on television, or listens to on the radio to condition the understanding and expectation of Black people, they will not understand nor expect anything from Black people. How true a statement, given the pandemics of racism and the continuing racial divide. Morgan, as an institution of preeminent learning, is blessed to have one, I think, of the national scholars who's done the research and has a national acclaim for being able to task us with understanding at a deeper, more comprehensive level what is happening in this whole world of communication and understanding. Talking none other than our beloved professor, Dr. Raymond Winbush, who is the director and research professor of the Institute of Urban Research, doing some incredible research into the nature and the ontology of where racism comes from, where white supremacy comes from, how it affects us spiritually, financially. You can go on down the line. So without any further ado, I want everyone to put their listening ears on and be prepared to have your questions ready for our time of Q&A after the presentation by our brother and our leader, Brother Raymond Winbush. Dr. Winbush.
Well, good morning, Dr. Keels. It's good to see everybody this morning. I've been, as many of us, you have been looking at the how could I say, the events of the past couple of weeks, everything from a newly elected president to our first woman and Black vice president, as well as the recalcitrance of our existing president, who is in a state of denial. But I'm going to stay on point. I tried to write some of this down so that we could get through the presentation and then take some questions and answers from the audience. So Dr. Keel gave me the topic of media images, racism, and stereotypical politics. And I asked the question, who's pulling the trigger? That's a lot to talk about in 20 or 25 minutes, but I'm going to do the best I can. I wanted to start with a quotation by Brother Neely Fuller, who's one of my mentors and the mentor of the late Dr. Frances Cress Welsing of Washington, D.C. Many of you know her. And it says, if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. And one of the arguments that I have as a psychologist is that many of us are very, very confused about racism. We recently had a person running for for congressman in the Baltimore area, Kim Klacik, and she's very confused. She asked for a recount yesterday or the day before yesterday, even though she lost by 100,000 votes. So I doubt if 100,000 ballots were cast by anyone that were false or fraudulent. But again, I'm going to stick the point and try to go through this so that we can ask some questions. So negative images of Africans have a long history in the West. When I was little in Cleveland, Ohio, thousands of years ago, we had a little book called Little Black Sambo. There's a picture of it. They tried to upgrade his image, but it was a stereotypical view of young Black boys that are still there, as we'll see in a second. Also, Topsy from Uncle Tom's Cabin, a book that was written in the mid-19th century, but persistent images today of the woman who grew but never grew up. And there's a difference. So these images are very long-lasting and powerful. They just didn't start in the past few years or anything else like that. So I'm going to give a few examples of them. Mammy, that is, of course, from Gone with the Wind, but the idea of Mammy is a woman who can tell white folks anything and not be reprimanded for doing it. So here she is in the immortal classic Gone with the Wind, in which she represents kind of the bossy, controlling Black woman, a stereotype to say the least. When I grew up in Cleveland, every other night we used to look at Amos and Andy, another stereotype of Kingfish, Sapphire, and the whole gang. Some of these images that are on TV nowadays are even worse than what Amos and Andy were. But they're images and stereotypes of Black people rather than representations of Black people. This is I want to go through this real quick. LeBron James was the first Black man to appear on the cover of Vogue magazine in 2008, about 12 years ago. And I don't know if any of you know who that woman is with her, but that's Tom Brady's wife, Gazelle. She's a model. And it's interesting that the woman who took the picture, Amy Leibovitz, has also taken pictures of other stars in various places. You may remember a few years ago, she took a picture of Demi Moore, the actress, on the cover of, I forget what magazine it was. I think it was Vanity Fair, and she was nude and pregnant. So in her house, she had a picture of what you see on the left here, a 1917 anti-German poster. And it's amazing the similarities between these two, an ape and a white person, and a Black man and a white person who looks, of course, like this man right here and this woman right here, King Kong and Fay Wray from the famous movie King Kong. Most of us saw King Kong. I could go into a whole psychological analysis of what Kong meant, but we don't have time to do some of that. But the images of Black people have always been distorted by Western media in a variety of ways. So here a few years ago, we have a picture of Beyonce, and she's doing a banana dance. And I asked several of my students at Morgan, you know, what was she imitating? They said, well, this is an original dance with bananas by Beyonce. But in fact, us old heads in the audience may remember, we may not remember, but we know of Josephine Baker from the 1940s, who also had a banana dance. And actually, Beyonce, I won't say copied, but she imitated what Josephine Baker had done some 80 years ago. So these images of us, of Black people, are very oftentimes stereotypical, and they're encased in a lot of sexuality, a lot of aggression, and so forth. Here's another one. This guy, his name is Lil Wayne. And if you can see the image real close on his belt, if I ask audiences, and it's subliminal, if you want to call it advertising, many people see the word rape rather than B-A-P-E there. Lil Wayne is a powerful icon. I'll talk a little bit about him in a minute. He was the one that actually coined the phrase bling bling and said that he wished he had patented that phrase because he would be wealthy now, even though he already is. So these powerful images are really given over to us to keep us in a certain mentality, to keep us hypersexualized, to keep us very, very submissive on the other hand. This was an actual doll baby that was sold in Harlem about 10 years ago, but you can still buy it. It was called Gangsta Baby, and it sold for the enormous price of $110. I don't know what it is now, but it actually sold out, and it's very difficult to buy this baby right now. But again, you see, even at young ages, we have this horrific looking Black child, or baby, I should say, with bling all over him. So these are being reinforced. These images are being reinforced even from the earliest time of a Black child's birth, and we've got to be cautious about them. So again, I'm going to read this. If you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. Stephen Biko, the South African activist, said he was killed in a South African jail, beaten to death literally, and then hanged. Said the greatest weapon, not one of the greatest, but the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And when I ask, students as well as adults, like what percentage of the world's population is classified as white, most Black folk will guess 30, 40, 50%. In fact, it's only 8% of the world's population is classified as white. Don't believe me, look it up in the Wikipedia. But I've asked myself as a psychologist, how did 8% of the world's population, and half of that, is men and the other half are women, how did that happen? And it's because of how they get us to think about ourselves in more obvious ways. So here we have our illustrious president. These are language that the occupier of the White House has used. I'm not going to repeat them because they don't bear repeating, but you've all heard these. When he was talking about the Black players of the NFL, he was talking about their mothers as well as the players. He was talking about Africa, Haiti, the Caribbean, and other countries when he referred to them as those type of countries. He called Baltimore, the city that we work in and live in, rat infested, filthy, and then said this very subtle way, how could humans live here? How could humans live there, rather? And when you say it the way he said it, it makes you feel as if Black people in these predominantly Black cities aren't really human. Now, if you ask our dear president whether or not, he's a racist, of course he's going to say no. I always thought that asking a white supremacist, are you racist, a really dumb question. I think if I were interviewing him, I would probably start up by saying, okay, we know you are a racist. Let's talk about that rather than ask them, because nobody on national television is ever going to admit that they're a racist. And during the election day, just a week or so ago, he said in that famous speech from the press room, he said, Detroit, he singled out, Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, all predominantly Black cities, and said that they are known cities, as he put it, where they are, that are corrupt. And see, I as a psychologist, I've got to look at not only what people say, but what people mean. And I think part of what he meant was to, cast aspersion upon predominantly Black cities like Baltimore, like Detroit, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee. And notice those were all the cities whose states he lost in. And I think it's very safe to say, and many of my colleagues are saying it, and we're doing some research on it, but if it were not for the Black vote right now, Donald Trump would have been reelected. We can talk about that during the Q&A as well. So we've got to avoid being used by racists. and accepting the images that they give us of ourselves. You know, it's amazing how white America turns to its comedians, turns to its rap artists for expertise on the Black community. Kanye needs help. He's off his meds. We can talk about what 50 Cent said a couple of weeks ago about he was going to vote for Donald Trump, even though he didn't like Black people because he was making over $400,000 a year and didn't want to increase his taxes. Not until his ex-girlfriend, Chelsea Handler, said, look, 50, I'll pay your taxes. He said, okay, now I'll vote for Joe Biden. Ice Cube just got caught up, and some of you may not agree, but you know, one of my areas of research is reparations, and he got caught up in something and didn't even know it had hit him. And the less we say about Waka Flocka, the better probably. But all of these people were used by the Trump administration. So who's pulling the trigger behind all of them, including Kanye, is none other than Donald Trump. So I want to end on this by giving you 5 things that I think that Black folks should do to just keep a sane mind in a very, very unsane world. The first thing is to read at least 30 minutes a day, something about African-American heritage. You know, sometimes my students will say to me, Dr. Winbush, 30 minutes is too long, but they'll look at Empire for an hour, or As the World Turns for, I don't know, 2 hours, or what's the show on Viola Davis is in it, How to Kill Somebody, whatever the name of it is. They'll look at that, but we need to spend at least an hour, well, I say 30 minutes a day, reading something about Black people. Another thing, a colleague of mine in Florida, Naeem Akbar, he had done research years ago saying that the older people who have engaged in political activity on behalf of Black people when they were younger actually live longer. So working on behalf of Black people is good for your mental health and your physical health. So I tell young people, and it's good to see what happened this past summer about many students all over the country getting, and actually all over the world, getting politically involved. Young people voted in larger numbers this election cycle than any other election cycle, and that's good for your health. So be involved with political engagement and support reparations. I'm always going to say that. The third one is to possess a deep and abiding knowledge of global African history. You know, usually on the bulletin boards in February, we see Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know, Frederick Douglass, but we should know who Martin Delaney is. We should go far, far deeper. The man right there pictured is John Henry Clark, one of our great historians. And we should go in depth, not only about Africans in the United States, but throughout the world, in Africa, Caribbean, Australia, and Europe, because there's a deep history that oftentimes we neglect. The fourth thing you should do is listen to a variety of African music. I love hip hop. Some of my best friends are in the hip hop industry, love them to death. But they listen to music within the Black diaspora other than hip hop. So listen to jazz, know who that man is in that picture. If we were in person, I would offer $5 to tell you that that was Miles Davis. Listen to R&B. I don't know if you've seen these 2 young brothers on YouTube that they claim they're listening to certain R&B for the first time and they get really excited about it. We should be acquainted with all types of music, the blues, reggae, high life, who Fela Kuti is. So listen to a variety of music. And last but not least, and this is to the young people directly, always have a 5-year plan regardless of your age. I don't care if you're 15, 20, 25, or 55. Always think about what you would like to be doing in 5 years from now. Think where you want to live 5 years from now, and have a partner who shares your goals and you share her or his, okay? So that's all I've got to say. I want to hear what everybody else has to say, and we should start some dialogue right now. Let me get out of this.
What a powerful, powerful presentation. As I was listening to you, I kept thinking about some of the issues that I confront with students from a spiritual basis on campus. And one of the things is that their understanding of the relationship of religion and the secular world. You were talking about music before, Doc. Talk a little bit about how important it is that the influence of a lot of music that we're listening to has its roots in the Black church. There was not that kind of separation that we so readily see and accept now, but in fact, a lot of, going back to time for us over 50, going back to Sam Cooke and all those people, we know they all came out of the church. And, I see Georgia Ford smiling, but, we all grew up with that. But now a lot of young people don't sense that there's that reality. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I should have put gospel up there as well. When I taught at Fisk, we had the papers of Thomas Dorsey, who some people call the father of gospel music. And if you look at, Brother Dorsey or ancestor Dorsey, he was kind of the bridge between so-called modern gospel, the spiritual, jazz, and blues. It was like an intersection there. I listened to gospel all the time. When I grew up, my favorite person was Mahalia Jackson, and still. And some of these young folk don't know who Mahalia Jackson is, but I do. And so it's very important because all of our music has always told our story. Gospel, the blues, jazz, even R&B. And it's always been about life. That's one of the reasons I'm concerned now about some of the music, not all of the music, because I've got friends in the hip hop industry, but some of our music now has turned the corner in terms of us singing about death. And we have sung about death, but in very spiritual terms. Now young people are more nihilistic in their music, and I've talked to them about that. So
powerful, powerful. Jump in, anybody, anytime. Just raise your hand and turn your mic on, and let's talk.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just joining. I missed the presentation, but when you talk about music, African Americans, I think about Africa and what's basic in Africa in terms of music, sound, and dance and connection is the drum.
That's right.
And I connect the drum with the heartbeat.
That's right.
So with that connection, we have movement. And our existence is based on movement. Right. Nothing happens until something moves. Mm. Even in our so-called stillness, there's movement. So with African Americans and Africans, along with what parallels our movement is rhythm, dance, and sound. And we make connections with each other in person and in the spirit world. There is a connection. So I'd just like to remind us of that thing.
It is very important. If you study, African history, I can't think of the name of that book. It's called Africanisms in American Life or something like that. Joseph Holloway, I believe his name. But American Black folk, when we got here on these shores, they took the drum away from us. They did not take the drum away from Africans who were in Brazil. And where you find the retention of the drum, you find a retention of African culture more present. So what did Black folk do as we always do? And I'm going to say something some of you may have never have heard of. Black folk invented ham bone. And when I was little, we did ham bone together.
Yeah.
And that was
you hit the knee in the chest.
Right? Ham bone, have you heard?
Yeah.
Papa gonna buy you a mockingbird.
Well.
We have always substituted the drum We had the kora in Africa, and over here, we helped invent the banjo, same type of instrument. So, African people, regardless of where you are, Sheikh Anta Diop wrote a book called The African Persistence of Our Culture, something like that. And European culture varies from Ireland to Germany to Russia, back to England or Spain. African culture persists. I've been to the continent. You can see brothers and sisters hanging out on street corners in Dakar, in South Africa, and here on North Avenue. We hang out. We like to be around each other. That rhythm, Kenneth, that you just spoke about. And that rhythm is in our music, regardless of what country we're in. It's in Jamaica, it's in Cuba, it's in Ghana, and it's in Brooklyn. And that rhythm,
it's universal. It's everywhere. It's universal. And we just have the genes to tap into it.
There you go. There you go. So I really resonate to what you just said, brother.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that part of my training academically years ago was in ethnomusicology, and it dawned on me, particularly if y'all remember Howard University at HUR back in the late 70s, Coach Onami had this phrase that the show they call the drum, civilization's earliest form of communication. And it always stuck with me because I think that the memberphone, the drum, has been a way in which we have created not only resistance to the racism, but it's helped us understand and keep pace with our African roots. I want to go back to what you said earlier, Professor, that just sort of struck me. Everything else that you understand will confuse you. Why do you think we are so confused in terms of not taking pride in some of the accomplishments that we've done? When you show the pictures of music, it reminded me of an assignment I did for the National Endowment for the Humanities back in mid-70s, when I went down to the Delta to record Mississippi Delta blues. And people thought they were just so crazy, but white folk were eating it up and exporting that stuff to Europe and making millions and millions of dollars off of Ma Rainey and Mose Benson and all these different artists. And yet the Black folk were feeling almost ashamed that we were playing that kind of quote unquote primitive music. What about our culture that should students and us older people be more proud of, that we sometimes hide and we seem to be almost tacitly ashamed of?
Well, I think that, again, the system of white supremacy makes us dislike ourselves oftentimes, and we don't even know it. For example, I always tell my students with regards to music, I don't know why we call our music old school music. We should never refer to Billie Holiday and Etta James as old school music. Rolling Stones, what's his name? Mick Jagger, he about 700 years old and he's still rocking. Yeah. They don't call the Rolling Stones old school. They just say he's playing rock and roll. So I think what happens is that, white America labels our stuff and then we buy into those labels. They also, if we put on certain music, like one thing that I've heard that I don't like, but again, is how our young people have been fed. During the demonstrations this past summer, you see a lot of signs that say, I am not your ancestors. And I've said, yeah, I agree. You're not Nat Turner. You're not Sojourner Truth. And when they say that, they've bought into what Black history or history books have fed on, that during the 1960s, the only thing that we had, only person we listened to was Martin Luther King. There were the Black Panthers, of course, the Republic of New Africa, the Black Liberation Army, but they don't know about it because the history books have turned them away from our ancestors, just like the books have turned us away from our ancestral music like gospel, jazz, and the spiritual, and only give us what is present. So I think we've got to teach our young people to go deeper into the knowledge, not only that they've been given, but what our ancestors gave to us.
That's an excellent point. Anybody else just chime in?
Yeah.
Georgia Ford.
Good evening, brothers.
Brother DeFore.
Good afternoon.
Reverend George DeFore, y'all.
Okay.
But I appreciate what Dr. Winbush has presented today. And as a retired pastor, you get a good feel of the Africanisms that are in the local church, and especially during the celebration of life services or funerals. Particularly in the rural areas, you have what was called the singing and praying bands.
That's right.
And those singing and praying bands would be celebrating the life of the decedent. I was at a service, and we had some white folk there, and they became very, uncomfortable as the service went on. And the service went on for 2.5 hours. Somebody here they expect for it to be 45 minutes, and but with the singing and praying bands, and one of our colleagues, Dr. Keels, who's from South Africa, when he got up to do the eulogy, he said, "I feel like I'm at home," and he started dancing in the pulpit. That just shows you that has been transmitted. For we who are of the dispersed still have that legacy from the motherland.
That's right.
I tried to share that in the book I gave you, Skip, on celebration.
Excellent book.
Lives served and the African within the African tradition. But thank you, Doctor, for that presentation you've given today.
Thank you, Dr. Reverend DeFore. I appreciate that. I mean, it's so important for us to connect with our African roots, and it's amazing how you'll see white people connecting with their Irish ancestry. Robert De Niro will connect to his Italian ancestry, but we kind of, that Africa stuff, and, Africa, we may not have been born in Africa, but like Marimba Ani said, Africa is born in us. And the celebration of Africa is reflected in our music. Every time I go to a step show, I don't care if the Qs, the Kappas, the AKAs, or the Deltas, and I know, that I've seen that same dance in South Africa among the Zulu.
Especially the boot dance.
Especially the boot dance.
Of course.
And so you see it when you go to the continent, but you can see it here, but we've lost the connections between there and here, and we've got to regain that and teach it to our young people.
Dr. Winbush, this is Doug Gwynn. I just wanted to get your perspective on how we can better engage and connect with our youth today. And the second part of my question is, with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris coming from an HBCU, what do you think that's going to mean for our historically Black colleges and universities, given the questions of their relevance and need in this country?
Well, to answer the second question first, hopefully we'll just dispel this notion that somehow HBCUs no longer serve a purpose. It's always strikes me like we don't say, Notre Dame doesn't serve a purpose anymore because it's Catholic, or Wellesley doesn't serve a purpose anymore because it's all women, or Brandeis doesn't serve a purpose anymore because it's Jewish. And where I used to teach at Vanderbilt, nobody says Vanderbilt doesn't serve a purpose anymore because it's white supremacists, So hopefully Kamala being where she is now, we have the first advocate and the first HBCU graduate in a position to really make a difference. So I'm looking forward to that. I think connecting the young people, I always say, if young people ain't listening to you, you need to retire. That's my criteria for when I'm getting out the game, that young people you have to talk and learn about young people's music. Young folk are really surprised I know as much about hip hop but you got to learn that stuff. This is the first time, and again, I believe it's the music industry's fault that Black older people don't celebrate the same music as Black younger people. For example, in the 1960s, when I grew up, my mother and father and brothers and sisters, we all danced to Marvin Gaye. We all, dealt with the Supremes and James Brown. There was no intergenerational divide on that. Now you find young people listening to, I don't know, Nicki Minaj, and older folk listening to, I don't know, Luther Vandross. And there's no reason why all of that can be combined. So have listening sessions. I had 10 more things I was going to talk about in that last list I gave, but I'm going to leave them alone. But one of them is to listen to music together intergenerationally. Because that's a good way of connecting with young people.
Yeah, that's a very powerful image. Very powerful image.
Dr. Winbush, I just really enjoyed your presentation. I want to hear more of it. I'm also a professor here at Morgan in Family and Consumer Sciences. And, we study family. We're the science of people and everything that impacts people. But I was listening to, as you gave those 5 tips, what are some things that I could do as a professor, that's engaging with young people? And one of the things I thought about was when you said the reading 30 minutes daily about African Americans. And I thought, boy, that's something I could put into my lecture, just start out as a warm up. What have you learned today? And kind of make it like you have to bring a current event. You have to bring something, because what I find is many of them are not aware of what's going on. And I'm always, not always, but definitely news is a part of my life, at least every day, twice a day. I'm kind of like updating myself on what's going on. And when I ask some things that I think they should know, like Dr. Fauci, I asked that yesterday, nobody knew who he was. And so I was just thinking, what can I do, as touching them and influencing them, is to really harp on that or bring that in, or maybe even have a book discussion, in all of my courses that, something on housing, talk about an African-American person who was involved in housing, or a Black architect, and just have discussion around that, because they will not do it on their own, I feel. But once you bring it in and they get engaged with it, then they're really excited about it. So that's one of my takeaways as I move forward with my instruction for my students.
I think it's very important to make sure your students are hooked in on what's going on. Last semester, I teach the same course every fall. And last year I asked the class, I kind of casually asked the class, who was Alice Walker? And this was a class of about 35 students. No one in my class knew who Alice Walker was. Now, they were psych majors, but I thought they were kidding. Then when I said, how many of you have read the book Color Purple? People said, oh, I didn't read the book, but I saw the movie. I said, Alice Walker wrote that. There was like no connection, as you said, Dr. Holland, between one thing and another. And I think that we as adults, we have to, make those connections for them and encourage them to seek connections between those things. It's interesting, back in the 80s, they wrote that book, The Dumbing of America. And I always say it started with George W. Bush being president. But I think we're in that era now, that a lot of people just don't read. This is the first time in American history, and I think part of it is because of social media, that more people are getting their news off their cell phones than they are looking at the news. There's a if you have Netflix, there's an excellent film on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary. And if you look at that, you'll see why we are the way we are right now, about everybody is kind of divided up into little silos, and we're not getting like this kind of group knowledge that was common years ago.
I get reminded of the motto, each one teach one.
Yep.
So if we do nothing more than grab somebody, mentor them, but first, one has to be well. I'm a counselor at Morgan. I practice wellness, which is the healthy balance of mind, body, and spirit. So you have to be so-called good to do that. Along with, at Morgan, I conduct a men's group where men talk about how they think and how they feel and how they behave in reference to wellness, development, and growing. Bottom line, teach them about Afrocentricity, know, about Africa and African principles as it relates to humanity, spirituality, and economics.
That's right. That's right. I outline a lot of this stuff in fact, part of my thing was from my book, The Warrior Method, plan for raising healthy boys, Black boys. And I think that it's very important that we could make those connections. Otherwise, we're not anchored. There's an old, apocryphal joke, but I think it's true that they ask a young Black boy in a classroom, where did he come from? Where did Black people come from? And he said, on the Greyhound bus. And I think that we don't have those connections that we ought to be having. And as I'm not kidding, Naeem Akbar, the Black psychologist, had done a study. The more you work in the Black community, doing work like Dr. Keels does, like you're doing, Kenneth, and others, the more you work in the community, the longer you live. I mean, it's just Black folk. And we need to do, really seriously consider doing that stuff.
Rites of passage is another tool that one could use to build up a mindset for spiritual and mental growth and development. One of the things that I plan to do once we get back to going to church is start a mentoring program for young Black boys from 8 to 12.
Well, you need any help doing that?
That's my plan.
Okay,
They come over to the chapel. We'll give you some space to do it.
Okay.
I invite you to come over to the chapel.
Talk to me.
Yeah,
That's
you
right.
gotta go nowhere else.
There we go.
Come on across campus. We put a little note on the door saying, no, I think that's very important.
Yes, it is.
Spiritual searching, I think, is one of the most difficult things you can do because it demands, number one, there would be an inherent honesty in you. And it's very difficult living in a society that makes us embrace dishonesty and embrace shortcuts to really get to the quick of it and say, what is it that I'm lacking? I'm still enthralled with that statement in the beginning, Dr. Winbush, that everything else will confuse you. It's probably nothing more than to be educated and confused. Or to think you have reached a terminal point with a degree or a job or a salary, whatever, and be confused. Not just how much do I make, but why do I make it, and what am I to do with it? Exactly. I think that in my 70th year, I feel more energized than I did at 20 because I could clearly see at 20 that the people in the church in Alabama were authentic. They were making sacrifices that oftentimes cost them their lives. I was so happy and elated that we recognized Reverend C.T. Vivian because we have a whole generation growing up that only knows Dr. King. Right. They don't know, the Fred Shuttlesworth. They don't know Hosea Brown. They don't know a lot of the people that were there. And these cats and women were out there on the front lines, not seeking any adulation or crowns, but living it out. That one thing that Biden said, his grandfather said, I'm probably quoting it incorrectly, have faith, but live your faith. That's right. It's so difficult to live your faith. What are we willing to help on our campus and beyond for young people to realize the gifts that Brother Lockett gave us? Last week, Dr. Winbush, Lawrence came up with a theme for us: the elephant, the donkey, and the lamb. Mm-hmm. If you could think about the political symbols, then the Paschal lamb. Right. I'm thinking only from the mind of someone that really did one of our cross country runners in Dr. Holland's ministry, Rachel Field, was talking about that during this COVID time, that it's been, people have been frightened to realize that every year she's recorded a PR, a personal record. And this year she hadn't. And then you realize that when you get that spiritual sense in you, you're willing to go further. I know for a fact that there are people who are thirsty to be able to understand the spiritual aspects of the diaspora. How did we endure the Middle Passage? How did we endure being on somebody's plantation and not knowing whether or not tomorrow you're going to be separated from your family, but can see down the road to know there will be a Morgan State University? I'm fascinated by our visionary founders, that they could walk right out of emancipation, and if they could only see this campus now, what would they ask? Are we using this campus to do what we can do citywide, nationwide? Or are we just concerned about, the things that make us more individualistic? I forgot about Josephine Baker, and Kennedy showed this presentation in the beginning with the banana dance that Josephine Baker did, in 1940, and then the Beyonce situation currently. And I thought, it is so amazing that we look through the eyes of our celebrities and don't realize that they are not servants. They are self-centered celebrities. They make $1 billion and you might make one. So what are we willing to sacrifice this morning in our life of living example, living our faith? Where are we poised to go with it? I think it's very important that we have professors as part of our weekly connection, because I know for a fact that Dr. Holland, you make a big difference at the chapel, knowing that you're both a faculty member, department, chair, and a chaplain at the chapel. To me, that says a lot. It's really important to hear, Ray Winbush talk about, growing up, and his family, everybody listened to different kinds of generational music. That's how we existed, but we didn't have multimedia platforms. We were just happy to see the platforms we had. There's a Sirius XM channel that plays a lot of old music, gospel, whatever. I just listened all day long when I'm driving around, because I'm thinking, like, I can't believe that. And one of the songs I heard the other day that described my situation, even though growing up in a single parent family, I wanted to pay tribute to my mom, was that the song that brother did called Patches, I'm Depending on You, Son. Go out and work and take care of the family. We grew up. And now a lot of times people are going out, they're trying to find out, I got mine, you get yours. So we need to make sure there's a galvanizing experience where everybody can share in what we have. I see Hooker Davis' name on here, and Hooker Davis, one of those quiet brothers, but he's the son of a Methodist preacher. And years ago, Hooker Davis, his father, have saved my brother's life. I'm talking about the 1980s. It's a very interesting thing that when people are out there for each other, there's some young person you're going to run into today, or some person who is going through some stuff. Reach out to them. Tell them to be part of this experience next week. We're going to have some incredible conversations down the road. But the one thing that just really got me again was, if you don't understand white supremacy and all it means, everything else you understand will confuse you. You are not junk. Ethel Waters said God didn't make no junk.
That's right.
Professor Winbush, this is probably not consistent with this last part of the conversation, but something that's been on my mind since the election is this 20% of Black males who supposedly voted for Donald Trump. And, your first statement, if you do not understand white supremacy, you don't know what's going on. So I related that statement to this group. I'd just like to hear your comments on.
Well, first of all, those data may have been exaggerated. That 20%
Right.
were Black men who vote. They were exit polls. You take exit polls on the day of the election. Who told his followers to vote on the day of the election? A guy by the name of Donald Trump. In fact, now they're saying that it may be the biggest campaign error that was ever made, because he should have told them to mail in their ballots like black folk, and the majority of white people did. So that 20% that was taken during the exit polls is not really representative of how black men voted in general. I've already seen, and again, this is how racism, white supremacy works. It puts us black men and black women against each other, because I've heard sisters already saying, man, you know, you brothers didn't vote, or you 20% of you, 1 out of 5 voted for Donald Trump. That's just not true. We're examining some of the data at the Institute right now, and we're going to hook up with the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies in DC to look at those data closely. But right now, the only other group that voted for Biden and Harris more than black men were black women, you know, and we think that 20% is really a highly selected sample of those conservative black men that voted because Donald Trump told them to vote on that day.
And it's believed that some of those black people that you see in the background,
Right,
when Trump is giving speeches, some of them could have been paid.
A lot of them are paid. You know, one of my colleagues in another state, he went to one, white guy from that taught at Fisk. He went to one of those rallies, and he asked the one of the black persons in the crowd afterward. He said, "Why are you?" He said, well, "I'm not supporting Trump, but they gave me $100 to hold this sign up." So we, again,
see that?
I think there's a text in the Bible, Dr. Giles, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's something about they would rather believe a lie. I think some people would rather believe a lie.
Yeah.
Believe it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's easier to embrace a lie because, you know, don't take a lot to pretend you know it. You know?
Exactly.
That's interesting.
And some people who support Donald Trump may be mentally ill. Okay, so we're not gonna leave that out for whatever reasons.
Look, y'all, you know, Reverend Bacoach, I mean, DeFore, you correct me on this. I really believe the people that follow Donald Trump it really resembles a cult more than a political following, because they know that he is lying. I mean,
right.
Washington Post has recorded over 3,000 lies he has told. They know that he isn't a Christian. They know that he has violated every one of the 10 commandments, but they still follow him. So if you put Jim Jones way back in '79 when they did all that stuff down in Guyana and killed all those, they were doing the same thing. You know, cult followers, they believe no matter what their leader. And then I heard one of my friends said this. They call it the Cyrus theory about in the Bible that King Cyrus of, was it Persia or whatever, that he was a wicked king, but he protected the Israelites. So they said that's what Donald Trump is, Cyrus. I said, well, you are really stretching it when you talk, you know, you're stretching theology a long ways when you try to make that analogy.
Biblical images of the king, you know, over and over again, point to the fact that people wanted to make a shortcut between the deity and the human.
Exactly.
When you build the Tower of Babel, that's the first indication was that you're not comfortable living by the deities. But what does God require? You know, to do justice and live humbly. You know, we have to be able to realize that in the era in which we live, the toughest spiritual question you will ever answer is, why am I here?
That's right.
And what is expected of me? However long I'm going to be here, what do you want me to do?
That's right.
What do you want? And Doug Wynn and I were talking about this last week. It's a fact that, yeah, some of us on this thing are theologians and stuff, but all of us are ministers. The ministry you provided today, Dr. Winbush, is as important as any sermon I've ever heard, because it pointed to some real salient realities about the nature of things in America. And a lot of times we want people to think there's going to be easy.
That's right.
There's no shortcut to being content. If Paul says, I've learned to be content, that's after years and years of trials and tribulations and pain and heartaches. Now, if you want to talk being content, if we could talk to our visionary founders, 1864, and ask them what possesses you to do what you're going to do that's going to create this centenary biblical institute. And do you know the kind of trouble that's going to cause in America in the next 150 years? Do you know that you're going to get both Ray Winbushes and Clarence Thomases? Come think about it. Now, what a big difference that we have some people who are endowed with a knowledge that will make them forever confused.
That's
And I happened to be in graduate school at the time that Thomas was at Yale Law School, so I know him very, very well.
Wow.
And I see so many of my acquaintances back then in the winter of their lives being miserable because if I could have done what I should have done, I would be a lot happier, one person told me. And now it's almost not too late, but it's time to wake up. With Teddy Pendergrass said, wake up everybody. Time to do teach a new way. We have to wake up. Folk, you've been tremendous this day. I wish everybody would show their picture or something. I'm trying to figure out who some of these people are. Like, if you don't mind us seeing you, like Art Willis and Daria and Cassandra. Hilko, you just probably on phone by they're all on computers.
Willis is a member of the class of 1967, a soulful centennial in Los Angeles, California.
Who is this out in California?
Art Willis, yeah.
Art Willis, okay.
It's my, hey Warren, how you doing?
Hey, Art, how are you? He was also my college roommate. And
I guess my picture's not up there, but I don't know what to do. So I'm IT challenged, but that's okay. I want to say, everybody, it's Warren was my roommate. Warren, how many years ago? Should we tell him?
52 years ago.
Yeah.
Have mercy, Lord.
This was Warren actually sent me the link, but I want to say I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. It's been a long time since I've been in Morgan, but I do want to say this. Like I said, I agree with everything that's been said, but I've learned over my many decades I step back and I look at what's happened in this country. Not just Donald Trump, he was like that before, but I know when Warren and I were at Morgan in 1964 to 67, beautiful time. We're talking about Marvin Gaye, Cool, all that kind of music. But I would never have imagined that at this point in my life, we would have already had an African-American president for 2 terms.
That's right.
And a African-American Indian vice president coming up. And I saw also that, and this is for the young lady there, I love to watch this, there's more women in Congress this coming term in the history, not only in Senate, House of Representatives, but also in the governorships. So there's hope. The journey will always continue. One of my favorite phrases is that one of the prices, the price of a liberal democracy is eternal vigilance. You always have to never be complacent. But I see the changes. We always gonna have Donald Trumps and Mitch McConnells. They will always exist. But I see the movement, these kind of discussions and a lot of other things, but the women, the people of color, the congressional and governmental landscape is changing slowly, but it is changing. So I am ecstatic about the things I've seen in the past like 20 years. There's a lot of negative stuff, obviously, but I think there's hope. So I think the journey will continue. So
Amen. Amen. Amen.
And Cassandra Fallon is on. She's a member of the class of 1968 as well, and very active with her congregation and the Trail of Souls that's been started by the Episcopalian Bishop Sutton. So you have her online today.
Morgan must have been some boy back in the 60s. Y'all some serious folk, man. It's the soulful centennials. My colleague in Methodist ministry, George Ford, all y'all, I just graduated high school in 68, but it wasn't too far behind y'all, But thanks be to God. I wonder if we all could just think about next week and bringing someone on, add on to the conversation. We got some great shows and discussions planned for you in the upcoming weeks, and we think it's going to be a blessing to you. I'm going to ask if one of our chaplains, Clarence Wayman, can you show your picture? You're incognito. And I know he's there. You know.
Yes, I'm coming on.
Yes, I'm coming. See, you Methodists, boy, y'all trying to hide this stuff, man. You know.
That's tough.
You always call the bishop and tell him.
I had to coordinate my eyes with my finger. So,
and we want to congratulate again, Dr. Jacqueline Holland. I was trying to see the national award so many of them you be getting these days. What's his latest award?
No, it's just been featured at Morgan, but the Distinguished Service Award from the American Association of Family and Consumer Sciences.
You go, lady.
Yes, you go.
I can tell people I know her.
Thank you.
Can we spend?
I know it too. I know it also.
Yeah. Let's spend just a moment in silence and just ask if Clarence would give us a word of benediction as we depart this day.
And I would like to thank Dr. Winbush and ask God to show us through your spirit, by your spirit, how to intervene with younger persons, that we may plant the seeds to begin the hunger and thirst for the history that we are discussing. Father God, we thank you for blessing us with knowledge and gracing us with understanding and gifting us with wisdom. Now, dear Lord, we ask that you would give us the heart and the mind and the commitment and the passion to carry this message beyond just what we've heard, but let's put legs under it that we may put it in action, and others may hear, others may know, and others may understand and not be confused. Bless Dr. Winbush as he has presented. Bless us as we have listened. And now, God, have your way and have your will.
Yes.
In Jesus' name, amen.
And women.
Women.
That's right. Can't have the man without the woman.
Come on, Doc.
It's just not going to happen.
Ain't going to happen.
Y'all be blessed. Stay blessed, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.